Hi everybody and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra video. So we're kind of going to be analyzing Trundle today. He was just barely released as we kind of expected yesterday when they released the first set of his followers, and now today we get the Trundle release. Trundle from Freljord, and as kind of a reminder, they also released the keyword Behold. Behold is you receive some sort of bonus for fulfilling a, I guess, requirement, and as far as we know right now, even though it could fit into other aspects, it is exclusive to Freljord at the moment. Probably will be released to Targon as well and included in Targon, but really could be included in any region. And the only really form that we see it in is that you have to see an 8+ card in hand or on the field in order to activate it. So, yeah, just as a quick recap. So, Trundle the champion. Trundle has regeneration. When I'm summoned, create an ice pillar in hand. And in order to level up, you need to play the ice pillar. So here we'll look right at the ice pillar. It's an 8 mana card. Vulnerable. When you play it, you automatically refill your mana that you used to play it, which is pretty nice. Play and round start, give the strongest enemy vulnerable this round. So I guess the cool thing about this card is that it enables Behold for these trolls. You do have to wait until turn 5 to produce it, and it looks like it's only going to be available by playing Trundle. So you can get the Ice Pillar one way, play Trundle, turn 5, get the Ice Pillar, and then get the Behold, I guess, keyword activated for your cards if you haven't already. So alright, so let's first analyze this a little bit. So, Ice Pillar, I think, thematically, and as a card, works okay, because it's replacing the mana. There isn't a lot of... there's not a lot of downsides to having this card. But because it's only produced by Trundle, and I kind of doubt it's going to be just run as a solo card, or available as a solo card, you have to play Trundle in order to get it. And you can only do that on turn 5. Now this is kind of turning into a mana ramp style deck, perhaps, with these expensive cards and kind of more mana ramp options. So you could play Trundle earlier, maybe turn 3 or turn 4 now. But the Ice Pillar is only going to be available through Trundle. So kind of something inherently wrong with this is that if you are banking on this to be your 8+ card in hand, some sort of, I guess, some rounds are already going to have been passed by before you can play Trundle at turn 5, so there is a chance that you don't get a lot of value out of your Behold units. You're going to have other cards in hand, so you can't really bank on this one being a card to use in order to get Behold. That's something that I see. But if you do have it, it's not really taxing your mana at all, since it's refilling it and replenishing any mana that you have. Alright, so that's one thing interesting about it. Now, I guess the second thing that's kind of interesting, though I doubt that you're going to kind of play it in this type of deck, is that Ice Pillar, it refills 8 mana no matter how much this card costs itself. So, I mean, it is possible that you use Trundle in like a mobilized deck and decrease the cost of Ice Pillar and then actually get more mana from playing this card. That's kind of niche, but a way to play it, and maybe some people aren't thinking about yet. And could be potentially good in a deck where you are running mana ramp and trying to get as many units down as possible. It kind of depends on what spells are available, to be honest. If we can run a kind of heavy mid-range deck without having to have a ton of spells in it, Mobilize could be a actual option in a deck like this and work. So far, Mobilize hasn't been really included into any meta deck, and it's kind of a meme card as it is. So just keep an eye out for that. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be meta from now on, but could work in a deck like this, and you could get pretty good value out of Ice Pillar because of that. Let's look at leveled up Trundle real quick. So Trundle now has overwhelming regeneration, and when you summon again, doesn't matter if he's leveled up, it looks like you get another pillar in hand, so keep an eye out for that. You could potentially use Recall on Trundle just to get more ice pillars in hand and be able to get more Behold keywords off if you don't have the option. Yeah, just keep that in mind. Attack, so grant me +1/+0 for each 8+ card you behold. Alright, so Let's see. So the earliest that you're going to be able to level up Trundle under normal circumstances is on turn 8. Turn 8. That's not including mana ramp, but I mean, I guess the problem with having, you have to have a ton of these 8+ cards in hand in order to get a lot of value out of Trundle and his now new ability. And you have to, and you're not going to have played 8+ cards onto the field except for Ice Pillar up until that point. And so you're basically going to be restricted to the cards in hand that you draw. So like, it doesn't really matter how many cards you have on the field. You're going to have one. It's going to be Ice Pillar, because you're not going to have been able to play any and have them seen on the field. So it's all going to be dependent on how many you have in your hand at the moment you're attacking. So I don't know that I necessarily like this, because you're going to have to, by round 8, have had accrued so many of these, I guess 8 mana cards into your hand and not have played them. So you don't get really any value, and I could be wrong about this, but as far as I understand it, they have to be on the field or in your hand. So if you've used like 8-cost spells, then they don't count anymore. I could be wrong about that, but that's as far as I understand it. And so you're kind of wanting to hold on to them until you level up Trundle. And so, yeah, you're just dependent on how many of these 8-cost cards are in your hand. Yeah, I don't know that I like this very much. It's not super good value, and there are easier ways to buff a card like Trundle besides oversaturating your deck with these really, really mana expensive cards. Things like Take Heart, things like, not Take Heart, Take Heart, things like, I don't know, what are permanent buffs that you can grant your units? I guess Starlit Seer, and going more that route with less expensive spells. Yeah, they're just other ways to buff your units rather than oversaturating your deck with these 8-cost cards. So I don't know that I'm necessarily a fan of Trundle. I don't think this is going to be game changing. It's nice he has Overwhelm. You're dependent on really leveling him up, and in all actuality, it really isn't that hard to level up Trundle. He's got one of the easiest level up conditions that there are. His main stat line here is 4/6, unless they have some way to remove him. And I guess kill him with Vengeance. He's going to be able to survive until round 8. And even if they do remove him with something like Will of Ionia, that almost works in your favor, because when you play him again, you get another Ice Pillar, which will help him with his abilities. So I mean, they have to outright kill him, and he's got regeneration. I mean, he's going to survive pretty much until round 8. There's not really any downside to playing Trundle turn 5. He's going to survive until round 8. But yeah, there's plenty of other ways to buff him rather than putting a whole bunch of these 8+ cards in your deck. And so I don't really know that the ability makes that much sense right now. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about him. I'm not super impressed by him. The Overwhelm is nice and could be used to finish off games, but I don't think you're going to be doing that through these 8 mana cards here, unless they release more that are kind of buffing cards as well. I don't really see that being a super big game-changing ability. Alright, so on to the next one. Augur of the Old Ones. Play. If you behold an 8+ card, grant an ally Overwhelm and Regeneration. Okay. So yesterday we were talking about how I think it was the Ravager was similar to the Scar Reaver Maiden. The kind of very similar stat lines. The Ravager, I think it's the Ravager. It's either the Ravager or the Scavenger, whichever one has regeneration. They have very similar stat lines to the Scar Reaver Maiden. And except for the Scar Reaver Maiden has Overwhelm, and that really what makes her a better choice. Even though she costs an extra mana, by that point in the game, you're wanting to do consistent damage to the Nexus with abilities like Overwhelm and Elusive. And so really the Ravager doesn't have that ability, because you have to he has no way to make contact with the Nexus. He's got regeneration, so he's like able to survive a little bit, but can't actually deal consistent damage to the Nexus. So Augur of the Old Ones kind of helps with that, because he's got overwhelming regeneration, and then if you have an 8+ card in hand or on the field, you can grant it to somebody else. And I'm guessing that card they are wanting you to use it on. I mean, wanting is kind of a strong word, but that you have the possibility of putting it on, especially in like a mana ramp deck, if that's where this kind of goes, is onto the Ravager. So this kind of, I think, combo is what they're looking for, and kind of helps with the underwhelming stat line of the Ravager. All right, so yeah, I think these two, they're wanting you to run the two together. Yeah. Let's see, as kind of a straight up card, 5/5 with overwhelming regeneration is okay. Once again, he has one more power than the Scar Reaver Maiden, but he costs one more, and he's granting these abilities to another card. So this card is actually probably a little bit better than the Scar Reaver Maiden. That's kind of my opinion. Especially if you're running in a mana ramp deck, you can get it out earlier anyway. Yeah, and it kind of allows you to put other cards in the deck that could benefit from having overwhelming regeneration, and maybe have other abilities that would be a solid inclusion into your deck, but kind of don't make a lot of sense without having overwhelm. So I think this card could fit in certain decks. I don't know that it is a meta-defining card though. Alright, so the next card, Trundle's Ice Quake. So it's a slow cost 8 mana card. Give all units -3 this round. Deal 3 to all units. Shuffle a Trundle into your deck. So you are giving -3 to even your units, and you're dealing 3 to all units. So this is like a super buffed Avalanche. This is basically a card that is meant to be used with cards that have regeneration. The problem with this is that it's a very slow card. You're using this to stall out, because if it's your turn to attack and you use this card, you're going to be giving, so you're never going to be using this on your attack phase. Very rarely, unless I'm like not thinking of a certain situation, you'll never use this on your attack phase because it is negating your attack. Now, what else this does is damage all of your units as well, and damage their units. And so this could potentially work in a self-harm archetype with something like Swain. You just need to make sure you've got ways to heal your units. Yeah, I don't know that you would ever run this in an actual deck as any cards, because I think you're limited in kind of its use and when you can use it. It could have some sort of synergy with fearsome units, because you're lowering the attack stat of your enemies, and so you might be able to use this as like a game finisher when it's your turn to attack. But like in general, I don't think you're going to include this in your deck, besides having it as Trundle's signature spell. I just don't see it fitting into decks very well. I think it is too much of a liability. It takes up too much room, and there are other cards that do this job better, like Avalanche, which is only a 4 mana spell and can decently clear out the enemy's side of the board in certain situations. So I don't really know that I like this card. Once again, too limited in its use. You basically are forced to use it during your defense turn, which could slow it down, but how is that really different from something like Winter's Breath? You're dealing, I guess, damage to them, so the potential to wipe out the board is a little bit higher. Late game, though, it's not as important. Not that it's not as important, but there are heavier units like with more health on the enemy side of the board, so it's possible you don't even take any of them out. And just, yeah, I think it's too much of a liability. Alright, and then we'll go down to the one below it because it's still from Freljord. Revitalizing Roar. Pick a unit in your hand to reveal. Heal your Nexus by its power. If you're enlightened, reduce that unit's cost to 0. Alright, so I don't know. This could have actually niche play. Pick a unit in your hand to reveal. So you're showing the enemy, if I'm understanding this correctly, what card you are using. And you heal your Nexus by that card's power, and then if you're enlightened, you're reducing the cost of that card to 0. So this is actually kind of an interesting card. So turn 7, if you were to use this, right? You want to use this on an expensive unit. So it turns it to 0. The problem with that is if you include it in the if you include it into this archetype and you're reducing a card that has more than 8 mana to 0, you're weakening Trundle and you're weakening the potential to get these behold abilities off. So that comes off as a problem to me. Why would you reduce the spell mana of these cards? And then once it's down, I'm not sure if that works as a behold unit as well, or because you played it for 0 mana, it doesn't count. So I don't really know how this card would fit into this archetype. It might fit into another one, but where they're releasing it with this, it doesn't really fit with these cards. And then if you were to use it on round 4, for example, that might be a way to play the card. Save up your mana until round 4, and then reduce the cost of your, or I guess you have to be enlightened, so no, that doesn't even work either. So yeah, I'm not really sure how this would fit into a deck and be efficient. I don't really like this card. I'll have to think about it. There might be other ways to use it that I'm not thinking about, but this doesn't make sense in this archetype, and it doesn't really make sense to include this slow card in your deck. It has the potential to be denied as well. I guess that's one thing to say for it, is that the only way to really interact with this card is to, one, finish the game by like taking out the remainder of the Nexus health, or 2, have denied, because you don't have any cards out. You can't use any spell tricks to or spells to get rid of cards that you are targeting on your side of the board. So that's one thing to say for it. It's hard to stop this card unless you've got deny. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so the 4-cost cards. So these last 2 are from Targon. Broad-backed Protector. Round start. Heal your Nexus 3. Deal damage to me equal to the amount healed. So it looks like the most that you can do is 3 damage to him. So worst case scenario, this card is only going to be living, if you don't block with it, he's only going to be living 3 rounds. So there's potential to get some pretty good value out of this. He's a 4 mana card. And he synergizes well with self-harm and like Vlad decks, it looks like. So, I mean, there's possibility to run this card in other decks, which I really like as a kind of from a design standpoint, is that he works in many different types of decks. And also he helps you, so he works in that archetype, but also he helps you stall out the game, which is really important in control type decks. Super important. So you're guaranteed to get 9 health healed to your Nexus. That is huge, 9 health. So I actually really like this card. Out of all of these cards here, even including Trundle, I think this card is the most interesting to me. And it's not even from Freljord, it's from Targon. Oh boy. You can probably tell I'm not super excited about these Freljord cards. Not super exciting to me. This Targon card, though, has some potential, and I actually think that this could be a solid card in a meta deck. I think that 9 damage healed to your Nexus is incredible, especially if you're trying to play a slow game and get to a point where you can just win the game late game. Super cool card. This could potentially work with a Targon Karma sort of deck, theme deck, and could be super good in that sort of archetype. Yeah, I really like this card. Alright, and then this last one here, Resplendent Stellicorn. So it's play, heal an ally, and your Nexus 3. So effectively healing for 6 damage. So this is kind of a super powerful Tavern Keeper, I suppose. This is also from Targon. So just more kind of healing and stalling tactics for a certain type of deck. It's, I guess, more efficient than the Tavern Keeper because you're healing for 6 and it only costs 5 mana. And so the equivalent mana would be, I guess, -1 for this card. You only have to spend 5 instead of 6. You are reduced to only targeting a ally for one of those heals, though. So one of those allies need to be injured in order for you to get value out of this card. It's turn 5, so it's very possible that you are at that point when you have the ability to play this card. So I don't know that won't necessarily be an issue. In general, this card is kind of vanilla. There's not really a lot to say about it. It could fit potentially in a control decks again. It seems kind of dependent on whether or not your allies are injured and whether or not your allies are bulky enough to survive kind of a lot of damage in order for you to get value out of this card. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. That one is probably better than a lot of these Freljord cards though that were released. So that's something to say about it. Alright, so I've already kind of talked in general what I think about this. Trundle, not super excited about. I don't know. He's kind of a basic champion, easy level up, so probably good for beginners to the game. His level up condition is not hard to fulfill, and unless I'm not thinking of something, but he seems pretty easy to level up and to survive in order to get to that point. Kind of like a Garen, to be honest. Yeah, easy to kind of survive, but he might have trouble fitting into decks that are actually worth playing to like climb in ranked. Could be wrong about that, but if I'm comparing him to Garen, that's kind of how it is. He does have Overwhelm though, so like I said before, he is a easy buff target, and you could get pretty good value out of him late game if you were to go kind of the Overwhelm route and buffing him up. Yeah, so that's about it. Tell me your thoughts about these cards. Once again, not super excited, so hopefully we get a little bit more exciting card reveal tomorrow. That's just kind of my opinion. Some people might be really excited for Trundle if they main him in League of Legends. Any of you out there, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Tell me your favorite card from the new expansion so far, and yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.